Hello, my name is Duncan and welcome to Bath Books. I'm back away from the donkey and it's another dreek day here in the north, so I've got some lights on in the room, so hopefully they may help, but it's been raining yet again. Anyway, this is a bit of a roundup left from last year that I was in two minds whether I should do it because it's sort of halfway into January, but I thought I would anyway. And this is like my favourite rereads of last year. I reread a lot, probably about at least half of the books I read are rereads because I think it's well worth it because there's many books you haven't read for years and you forget, and it's just enjoyable to go back to old favourites as well. So yeah, these are out of the books I've read. I've put a link to the video that I've got of my favourite sort of new reads to me last year. I will put a link to that down below, and that's like the companion video to this. And we'll just get on and I'll show you. There's about 10 or 11 of them, I can't remember how many, of all the books I read last year, and these are like my favourite rereads. So we will make a start. Because the light isn't that good, and I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see the covers, I'll show the covers and then I will pop a little graphic-y thing up there, because that shouldn't be too bad of the proper covers. Anyway, so my first of my favourite ones was Harry Harrison and the Technicolor Time Machine. I love Harry Harrison. His books are great, they're always fun. His serious ones are very well thought out and should get a lot more things. But Technicolor Time Machine is a great fun book. It's basically set when somebody wants to make a movie, but everybody's fed up with movies, they're not making enough money. And this guy's got a time machine. So they want to make a movie about the Vikings discovering America. So they go back into time to technically film the Vikings discovering America. I've got quite a lot of this is set in my home county in Orkney, so that makes it quite funny. And basically they go back and they literally film real Vikings doing stuff and trying to stop them murdering people, and it's a very entertaining read, as most Harry Harrison is. So that was the Technicolor Time Machine. My second of my favourite rereads is an Anne McCaffrey book, not one of the Dragon books, The Crystal Singer, which is probably one of my favourites of her writings. The Crystal Singer, I think it's a trilogy, and this is the first one, which is the best one, and it is about a singer who wasn't quite up to par, and she goes to this planet where they mine crystals, and they mine them by literally tuning a cutting device, so they've got to have perfect pitch to do this, but also to actually mine on this planet you get some you have to acclimatise to this planet, and this organism gets inside you, so it affects you. You get long life, but you lose your memories and that. But it's just a really, really good read. The second and third books aren't quite as good. They hit more sort of romance territory, but they're still very good reads. I've got in... This was originally... This first Crystal Singer was published in in a anthology collection called Continuum, and there's 4 of them. And in that collection, authors wrote books that were split into stories that were split into 4 parts. There's a Gene Wolfe book in there. There's an Anne McCaffrey book. I've got the first 2 of them, and I want to get the other 2 because apparently the ending of the book is quite different to what this expanded into. So, Crystal Singer is probably my favourite of one of Anne McCaffrey novel, and she was a great writer, so well worth a pickup. Next we have a book, and I put this book on my books I think should be a sci-fi masterwork list as well, which is Gordon Dixon's Lost Dorsey. And this is 3 short stories. The main story, Lost Dorsey, is great. It's about a military race of the only thing they have to trade is their people in this expanded galaxy as mercenaries, but they are like the top mercenaries and they are more leaders. And it's the morality of war. It's about pacifism. It's not as simple as it seems to. And the story Lost Dorsey is about a Dorsey mercenary who still does not want to fight. And it's an incredible story. I love it. And there's 2 other stories. I'm trying to think all the other ones. There's 1 or 2 other stories in here. I don't remember. I think Soldier's the other one in here. And maybe no one. But yeah, Lost Dorsey, Gordon Dixon. If you've not read the Dorsey series, or the Children's Cycle as they now call it, look it up. And the other one I reread, which not much to say about, is The Hobbit. I'd not read for quite a while. That is my battered old reading version. Look at the state of that. I'm saying that it's got some gorgeous prints in it. This was an old, this one's very old. But yes, my original copy, this is, I think, from whenever. And I have another copy of it here. And for some reason, I have multiple copies of The Hobbit, as do Lord of the Rings. Okay, my next of my rereads. Let's just see 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Actually, I've got 12. Actually, 11, because The Hobbit's twice in my favourite rereads here. Next one was Clifford Simak's classic City, which is a book I love. If you don't know, it's about dogs, it's about robots, what's not to love. It's about in the future where the planet is basically, dogs are the main species, and they sit round and tell about this legendary creature called man. And it's all the stories about on there. It's a great book. It's what's known as pastoral science fiction, because it's almost a feel-good thing to it. Clifford Simak does play fast and loose with evolutionary biology at part of it, but if that's your focus on it, you're missing the whole point of the story, because I've seen some people get really obsessed by that point, but it doesn't matter. It sort of misses the point of the whole story. So Clifford Simak, it's a good place to start City if you want to start reading some Simak as his way station. Sean Standfast is the master of Simak. He's a huge Simak fan, so you can always pop across to his channel and see what he's some of his videos on that. But yeah, so Clifford Simak City was another one of my favourites of the year. Ooh, pile of books falling on. And my next one is a fantasy book. You notice all these are actually, I realise, all bar one of science fiction and one fantasy. And I did read other things other than fantasy and science fiction. It is Rachel the Demon King, Raymond Feist. And this is the third one in the Serpent Wars saga, which is 4 books, and it's all part of his Rift War cycle, which is 29 books, I think, 29, 30 books, which I'm slowly rereading over a couple of years. I've just been dipping in and out. And I read the Serpent Wars saga, and I forgot how good it is, and it's probably one of my favourite series of books in it. And this third one is just devastating. People die, and it's incredibly written battle scenes, but it's incredibly emotional if you've grown attached to some really fantastic characters. So yeah, Raging Demon King, Raymond Feist was that one. And a year can't go by without me reading some Asimov of some form. I read 2 or 3 Asimovs last year, and I did a reread of the Rest of the Robots collection of robot short stories. And Asimov has to be there because I love Asimov. This has got some really good ones. It's got one of the favourite ones, Galley Slave and Lenny, which are some of his more well-known ones of the Rest of the Robots stories. But yeah, always read Asimov, some robots. And next I've got 2 Robert Heinlein books coming up. I've got Friday, which was released 81-82. I love this cover, and it's about a courier, genetic person courier. It's quite controversial, this book, as there is a sexual assault scene right in the beginning, and I understand why people have issues with it, but I also see why he wrote it like he did. But I still think it's a very good book, and Ray Heinlein. Later in his career, his sexual content can be a bit weird, but I almost get it, if you get what I mean. But yeah, that's Robert Heinlein's Friday, which I wrote. And the other Heinlein I read was Glory Road, which is just a big old adventure. It's probably the only fantasy, almost consistent fantasy that he wrote. And it's basically about a guy who travels through on great adventures. I think what it says here on the back is unfathomable adventures. Incredible imagination, sex and brutality, heroism and recklessness. So it's just a weird car outside. That's what I'm seeing here. Nothing to do with me though. And the final 2 books I've got are Philip K. Dick. And if you are regulars here, you'll know that I'm doing some comparisons for Philip K. Dick's books and the films that were made on them. And this January I'm doing Blade Runner and Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. I said there should be the first of the videos out hopefully in the next week, which will be the video about which version of Blade Runner should you watch, which is a kettle of worms if you ever one. But anyway, I read 2 Dick books last year, and 2 ones I've not read for a long time. The Cosmic Puppets, which is probably more of a fantasy one for him, and it precurses a lot of the information he had in books like Valis later on. And that's basically is about a man who, if you hear noise outside, I think it's a man pulling drains up, because we've had a lot of flooding. But yes, it's about a man who wants to go back to his old hometown, where he goes there, and he goes back there and nobody remembers him, and everything back there is just totally different to what he remembers as a child. And that's all I'm going to tell you about that. It's a fun book. It's one of his, I think it was his first published novel. But as with Philip K. Dick, it's always well worth reading. And my final book I reread last year was The Man in the High Castle, which is one of his most famous books and is a classic. And rereading this, first time I've reread it probably for about 5-6 years. And it's about an alternate reality where Germany and Japan won the Second World War, and this mysterious book that they were trying to track down. But what really impacted me when I read it, which I really forgot, was how fantastic his world building is. How fantastic and believable the world of Germany winning the war, and all the small details is just stunning. And I said they're all after this book that this so-called person has written, a mysterious book called The Grasshopper Lies Heavy. But I said the most impactful thing really is the world building in it. It's just totally believable of how he's done it. And I said, as always with Philip K. Dick, it's always what's real, what's not, and what the hell is going on. But yeah, that's The Man in the High Castle. I said Philip K. Dick, as far as I'm concerned, everybody should be reading him. But yeah, that was my favourite reads of, I said, of last year. Favourite reads, favourite rereads. These are all books that I've read before many times, some of them more often than others, and they were the ones that sort of stuck out to me that I was really glad that I reread them last year. So yeah, so that's the end for this video, and I will speak to you all very, very soon.